All right, Lexi, can you tell me a little bit about your schooling experiences as a child and also as a student?
So as a child, I went to a Montessori school for kindergarten, which was different than public school. It was more like interactive. And then I went to public school for all of my grade schooling. I always enjoyed school. I would say my best subjects were math and language arts, and I struggled with science.
Okay. What were some of the best parts of your experiences?
I would say the music aspect was my favorite part, just learning instruments, going to chorus classes.
Did you find yourself to have a good group of friends, both girls and boys, or was it more?
I would say I was kind of born into a group of friends, considering like all my neighbors were my friends in elementary school. More girls than boys, I would say.
Okay. And what were some of your worst parts of your school experiences?
In the beginning, I didn't like to leave home. I wouldn't enjoy like when my mom would drop me off for school. I'd say maybe I even got impatient during the day because they were long days.
Yeah. How, if at all, were your schooling experiences particular to your gender and or generation?
I wouldn't say specifically towards my generation, but for my gender, I would say I noticed it probably most in gym class when we had different criteria for physical education requirements, such as like the boys were required to do harder things to get a presidential award when girls were required to do lesser things.
Okay. What advice might you give to teachers based on your schooling experiences? And is there any specific advice that you might give to teachers who work with girls?
I would say for physical education classes, I would advise the teacher just to make sure that girls feel just as empowered as boys and just as athletic. In classroom settings, I would say that teachers should focus on group work, being more interactive between boys and girls so that they're comfortable with working with each other.
Okay, so not just girls work with girls and boys work with boys.
Right.
Do you think that women and girls are treated differently than boys? Why or why not?
In the education system, I wouldn't say they're really treated that differently. I never personally noticed anything, especially as you get into higher education. I think it's mostly equal.
Okay. And were you encouraged to further your education, and by who?
I was encouraged by my parents to further my education, and I was also encouraged by most of my high school teachers to further my education.
Was there anything in particular that influenced you to choose the career or field that you chose?
I originally started as a music education major at Westchester University, and I changed it because I saw that as more as a talent and a hobby, and I changed it into criminal justice because I was more intrigued and interested in the subject.
And in your field, do you feel that your education experiences are equal or fair to men, or do you feel that they get more of an advantage?
In my education, I believe that it is fair between men and women. We both get the same kind of education. We're in the same classroom. But as I further my career, I would say in jobs, it would be easier for a man to get a job over me just because the system was created by white males, and that's how it's sort of stuck today.
Okay. And how do you feel that the pay would be? Do you think that you'd be starting off as a similar pay rate as to a male who's first starting off?
I'd say if I got the job that I want originally, I would get the same amount of pay, but I feel as a woman I might have to start at a lower ranking and make my way up.
Do you feel that men and women are meant to do specific things? For example, do you think that men are supposed to be the breadwinners and be able to support the household while women stay home and cook and clean? How do your views relate or differ to this statement?
I would say in my generation, most people probably believe that women are meant to have an education, meant to go to school, meant to get a job. But I would say the household I grew up in, it wouldn't be hard for me to believe that women should be at home, because that's what my mom did most of my life. She was at home taking care of the house while my dad was working. So now it's nice to see that we have grown up in a system where we do have like an opportunity.
Okay. So your parents have more of a traditional view, while you see in our upcoming generations that times have changed a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you describe your schooling experiences as a child and also as a student?
As a child, I liked school, I liked to learn, I was always engaged and liked to help the teachers and enjoyed most of my classes.
What were some of the best parts of your schooling experiences and why?
I would say the athletics were one of my stronger points, and I was very competitive, and so playing against the boys at the time that I was in school, the girls were not able to compete with the boys, and when I was in middle school, we were able to see that PIAA rule change, and girls were able to integrate and also compete. So I was able to run track against some of the boys.
Okay, so it was like kind of co-ed. Did you find yourself in a good group of friends? Was it girls and boys? Was it mainly just girls, or?
My group of friends was primarily boys. I found the girls were too exclusive in different groups and didn't include everybody. And I found I was much more comfortable having guy friends.
Was that frowned upon in any way from either your parents or your peers?
I don't know that it was understood as well. I think a lot of people assumed that if you were a girl, you should have girlfriends, and I was much more comfortable having had a bunch of brothers to interact with the boys.
What were some of your worst parts of your schooling experiences and why?
Probably the worst part was the unfairness of girls not being able to compete with the boys until I was further along in my middle school career. I was very competitive, and that I found was very, very unfair. There was also differences in some of the courses that we had to take. Girls weren't encouraged to be hands-on with anything other than sewing, cooking, things such as that. We were not encouraged to, do financial type of things, which a woman or any person, whether it be a woman or not, needs in the world to get by.
How, if at all, were your schooling experiences particular to your gender and or generation?
What do you mean by that?
Did you feel that being a girl affected any way kind of that the teacher would have treated you at all?
I think more of the girls were treated as pets, if you will, as far as helping the teacher, being able to do things like that. I think the teachers relied on the girls more for assistance, handing out papers, picking up papers, cleaning blackboards, those types of things, copying papers. Rarely remember the boys were always more looked at as the jocks or the people who were thought to be above that.
Okay. What advice might you give to teachers based on your schooling experiences? And is there any specific advice that you might give to a teacher who works with girls?
I would say that teacher needs to make sure that she has a voice and is aware of what's going on and the dynamics in the classroom. I would suggest that she tried to build confidence and make sure that a girl demands respect for herself and her environment, and that she understands that she can be self-sufficient and does not need to have a male partner in order to be successful in the world.
Do you think that women and girls are treated differently than boys? Why or why not?
I think that the gap has definitely gotten smaller, where there's much more equality. I don't know that girls are still thought of in the same light in different areas, although we have made great strides in the sciences and in being able to attend and enlist in the armed forces. But I still think that there's probably some stereotypical professions out there that could stand some additional integration from the females.
Can you name a few of those professions that you feel are stereotypical?
I still think that sometimes you see some of the accounting firms, the white collar type firms. Girls aren't thought of to be handy where they're not encouraged to do things like auto mechanic repairs and things like that, where some are highly intelligent and would be very comfortable doing so.
Okay. Were you encouraged to further your education to go to college, and by who, or why or why not?
I was not encouraged to further my education. In my day, it was not. It was more thought of as a male-dominated field to go on to college. It was more expected that a woman would stay home, raise her family, and then after her family was raised, then enter the workforce. I started out in college. I went to a Delaware County Community College for a year. I did very well, and for an unknown reason, probably my lack of confidence, I did not continue, and found myself then with 4 children and the need and the want and the desire to continue my education. So at that time, I embarked on a journey to complete a professional designation, which took me several years, and it includes master level courses.
Okay. What influenced you to choose the career or field that you chose, and why?
I didn't purposely go into the field that I went into. I spent a month in Europe after I graduated high school and had no real direction, didn't really know where I wanted to go. They had an opening where my mother worked at an insurance company, and I took an opportunity at that, starting in the mail and file area of the company. And part of the reason I went to the company is my father was often laid off as a blue-collar worker, as a sheet metal worker. And this company, I was told, had never had any layoffs, and they had a pension plan. So I felt that maybe if I started there, I would be able to, see if I could make a career of it, never realizing or believing that 35 years later I would still be there.
Okay. And when you first started, was it a more male-dominated field, or was it equal?
It was definitely more male-dominated. All the higher level professional type of positions were definitely the underwriters, the claims people were all male-oriented for the most part.
Do you think there's a reason for that?
I think that was just what how history had proceeded. I've seen in 35 years tremendous change in that, and the sway has been to have many more female managers as well as female vice presidents, and you've seen great growth within the women in the company over the years.
Right.
It's had to evolve to keep up with the times.
Did you feel that your education experiences were equal or fair to that of men, or did you feel like they had more of an advantage?
As far as the college level, I felt that men had more of an advantage only because they were, at least outside of my family, they were more encouraged to go. In my family, it was more encouraged that the boys, if you were athletic or that they, people felt that the men should go because they'd be the breadwinners of the family and that they would earn more money to support a family.
So that leads me to my next question. Do you feel that men and women are meant to do certain things? For example, do you feel that men are supposed to be the breadwinners and be able to support the household while women are supposed to be home and cook and clean? Do you agree with this statement, or how do your views relate or differ to this?
I believe that there has to be a balance. It definitely depends on the dynamics of the people. Unfortunately, in today's world, the cost of the daycare is so difficult that it puts people in a very hard situation. I think many women want to work and contribute to the family, but also find themselves conflicted because of either substandard daycare or daycare that is cost prohibitive.
Do you have anything else that you would like to add?
No, I like to see the strides that the women have made, and I think that women make a huge impact on the world, but I think men as well as women should be well-rounded and should receive a fair education and be able to do everything in the household, because you never know when you will be left to manage those things. And if you don't have a proactive or an active role in handling a household and throughout your experiences, you won't be well equipped to move forward.
Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, so can you describe your schooling experiences as a child and also as a student?
As a child, I grew up in a very urban area. Majority of my school was African American and ESL students. So as a student, it was a lot of the times the teachers were dependent on their aides to make sure every single child understood what was going on, and it was difficult. And as a student in college, first time around, I felt it was pretty easy to understand it as a student. It was very adaptable. And the second time around, it's actually extremely difficult from being 5 years from the last time I sat in a classroom.
Okay. What were some of the best parts of your schooling experiences and why?
Some of the best experiences I had during my schooling was the ability to be able to take certain courses that I wouldn't be able to take. I was able to take a lot of AP courses, and I had a lot of teachers that were very helpful, very knowledgeable about what they were teaching, and they had great advice, especially when I was in the period of looking at colleges and determining what my major would be.
Okay. Did you find yourself to have a decent friend group? Was it mainly girls, boys, mixed? How was it?
I was all over the place. I was in the band and the orchestra, so I kind of hung out with the geeks, like the band geeks. But then I was also an athlete, so I hung out with a lot of the football players, the basketball players, a lot of the sports teams. I was on student council, I was in the Italian club. I mean, I was kind of the social butterfly. I kind of went to group, and I had friends in every group, which was kind of nice.
Cool. What were some of your worst parts of your school experiences and why?
Probably the worst experiences were the constant interruptions from students who did not want to learn. There were constantly fights and just disturbances throughout the day. There were students who did not want to be there, and the teachers tried to make them understand that they needed to get an education, and they just did not care.
Do you think some of that has to do with being in the urban setting?
Oh, most definitely. When students don't have the adult supervision like what they have in the school, and they don't have it at home, they become less likely to succeed in life. They have a difficult time staying on track and actually being successful in general.
Okay. How, if at all, were your schooling experiences particular to your gender and or generation?
I feel like my generation was during the period of time where all the PSSA scores were being determined if you graduated high school.
Mm-hmm.
So my age, we were the guinea pigs of it, and it was that period of time where Pennsylvania as an educational state were trying different techniques from other states to help students succeed and graduate with better English and math scores on the PSSAs.
Okay. Did you ever feel like being a girl affected the way that a teacher or other children treated you in the school system?
I don't think so. I mean, every teacher is going to have a biased opinion of if they like boys over girls, but even being a white female in an urban area, I felt like I got the same respect as an African American girl or a Hispanic or a Latino or an Asian girl. So we were everyone was on the same playing field. There was no one got any like ups about anything.
Okay, good. What advice might you give to teachers based on your experiences, and is there any specific advice that you might give to teachers who work with girls?
I would say for advice to give to teachers, give them as much advice, especially if you're a female teacher. You have to motivate girls because at this time in our lives, when you're in your teens, it's the most prevalent to deciding on how you want people to take you as. So to build that self-confidence in a female is really a big determinant of who they are.
Okay, good answer. And then, do you think women and girls are treated differently than boys? Why or why not?
I think women are treated differently. I think it's also the stereotype that women are more feely and more needy of just how it is, and men are always been taught to be independent and strong and everything. But I feel like today's society, the women are starting to conquer a lot of things, especially with the business world.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
I read in one of my textbooks recently that the top 500 Forbes 500 companies, more than 50% of the CEOs are women nowadays, compared to even 20 years ago, where 90% were all men.
Okay. Wow. Were you encouraged to further your education? And if so, by who?
I felt like I was encouraged to get my education from my family, especially my mom. She grew up in the era where her mother went to war and was a nurse and got her nursing degree while she was at war, and it taught my mom to be strong and be independent and be able to rely only on herself and not a man.
What influenced you to choose the career path that you have chosen?
I feel like I determined my career path. I fell in love in the fitness world. I fell in love with the business, the idea of running my own business. So being able to put both of them together, I've been able to make this magic concoction and be a strong, independent woman who runs her own business at some point in her life.
Cool. Did you ever feel in your education experiences that men had more of an advantage? Did you feel like it was men and women were equal?
I feel like majority of the time, men and women were equal. I think it's more when you get into the internships where it's like a dog-eat-dog world. If you're not as strong as a man, then companies will look at you that way.
Okay.
So you kind of have to force yourself to become not a man per se, but to have a strong independence about yourself and be determined.
Okay. And did you feel that men and women are meant to do specific things? For example, do you feel that men are supposed to be the breadwinners and be able to support the household while women are supposed to be at home, cook, and clean? How do your views relate or differ to this statement?
I say they differ because I grew up in a family where both my parents were breadwinners. I mean, yes, my mom worked part-time when I was growing up as a kid, but that's also because she wanted to raise us and not have us in daycare as much. But also, my father has been a nurse for over 30 years. And during that time, when he went to nursing school, he was one of two men in the whole entire nursing program. So nowadays, being a nurse is not a female job. It's actually more of a male job because there's a lot more lifting involved.
Okay.
So.
And is there anything else that you would like to add?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, thank you.